What's he building in there? What the hell is he building in there?
It had taken Enron 16 years to go from about 10 billion of assets to 65 billion of assets. And it took them 24 days to go bankrupt.
What the hell is he building in there?
This company collapsed so quickly and so entirely. I mean, it was into bankruptcy within a matter of weeks. It just immediately had all the makings of a gigantic scandal.
He's hiding something from the rest of us.
The fatal flaw at Enron, if there is one, you say it was pride. But then it was arrogance, intolerance, greed.
So many of them were blinded by the money that they didn't see that they were sinking their own lifeboat.
We have a right to know.
It just got hungrier and hungrier. Sooner or later, they were doomed to go off that cliff at 90 miles an hour.
It's astounding that they got away with it for so long.
In reality, Enron was a house of cards.
What we didn't know is that the house of cards had been built over a pool of gasoline.
It all sort of became smoke and mirrors.
Committee will come to order.
This is a case of America's largest corporate bankruptcy. The question here is what happened, who was responsible for it happening, and what can we do to prevent this sort of thing from happening again?
I think the Enron story is so fascinating because people perceive it as a story that's about numbers, that it's somehow about all these complicated transactions. But in reality, it's a story about people, and it's really a human tragedy.
Lay comes to the story of Enron from very humble roots.
My father was a Baptist minister, and he was ordained a Baptist minister while I was very young, probably 2 or 3 years old.
Ken Lay was a Baptist preacher's son in a family that had been poor all its life. And he, throughout his life, worked several jobs as a kid, and clearly had in mind that things could be better and wanted things to be better and had a huge ambition to make wealth for himself. He told a story later about sitting on a tractor dreaming about the world of business and how different it could be from the way things were for him and his family. Lay was a PhD in economics, and he became very early on a real apostle for deregulation. He was way ahead of the curve on this. He was thinking about energy markets that would be deregulated, and in particular, a natural gas industry that was shackled by regulation. And he pushed aggressively in Washington to change all of that.
Who could ever reach me was the son of a preacher man.
In Washington, Lay became part of a new crusade to liberate businessmen from the rules and regulations of government.
Government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem. The societies which have achieved the most spectacular, broad-based economic progress in the shortest period of time are not the most tightly controlled, not necessarily the biggest in size, or the wealthiest in natural resources. No, what unites them all is their willingness to believe in the magic of the marketplace.
That old black magic has me in its spell.
The magic power of deregulation pushed Ken Lay to found Enron in 1985. Through a merger of vast networks of natural gas pipelines, Lay thought Enron would be poised to take advantage of the government's decision to let gas prices float with the currents of the market.
Ken Lay had a view of deregulation from the standpoint of all the money that he thought could be made.
Ken Lay wasn't alone. A couple of Texas oilmen shared his views on how to get government out of the energy business.
I think they could sort of understand each other. It was, professional courtesy between a sidewinder and a timber rental snake.
Lay was closer to the father, but while he was governor of Texas, George W. Bush was only too happy to make phone calls for Ken Lay.
This absolutely has no precedent. This is by far and away the most important major relationship of a presidential family with a single corporation in American history.
When Rich Kinder, one of Enron's executives, left the company, Lay arranged for a video Valentine.
Rich, I've been asked to think of one thing I could say to you on your departure from Enron, and it'd be this: don't leave Texas.
Well, Rich, you have been fantastic to the Bush family. I don't think anybody did more than you did to support George. And of course, at this stage in my life, and Barbara's too, that's what really matters, your family and your friends.
Early on, George Bush Sr. helped secure billions in government subsidies for Enron International, and he helped promote Lay as deregulation's ambassador at large.
Enron is a company that deals with everyone with absolute integrity. We want people to leave a transaction with Enron thinking that they've been dealt with in the highest possible way as far as integrity and truthfulness.
He always wrapped himself in the cloak of moral rectitude. But there was one episode early on that raised questions about whether he was actually walking the walk. This was the Enron oil scandal, also known as the Valhalla scandal.
While you were at Arthur Andersen, were you involved in an investigation at a company called Enron Oil?
Yes, I was.
The issue with the company in 1987 involved the misappropriation of monies by two traders.
In 1987, two oil traders made bets for Enron on whether the price of oil would rise or fall. Oil trading is like gambling. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. But Enron Oil always seemed to win, much to Ken Lay's delight.
I tried to explain to Ken Lay the tremendous risk that you have in that market. You can lose 10 times your original investment.
A veteran trader, Mike Muckleroy, was suspicious of Enron Oil's steady, high profits.
Well, this oil trading business had profits that nobody could really understand, and in fact that many of Ken Lay's lieutenants questioned. They said this business can't be making this much money legitimately. Something weird is going on.
Something weird was going on. The first hint came from an anonymous tip about the president of the company, Louis Bourget.
Bourget had taken some $3+ million of corporate funds and put it in a personal account of his.
There were offshore accounts, phony books, and a trail that led from the company's treasurer, Tom Mastroeni, to a mysterious Lebanese speculator no one could find, M. Yass.
What name did you suspect that was?
My ass, and M. Smart. I said, that's Maxwell Smart. I mean, these guys are playing games.
Bourget and Mastroeni were summoned to Houston. First, they presented falsified bank records to Enron. Then they admitted they had diverted company profits to personal accounts.
It was brought to the attention of the Enron board. Auditors were brought in as well to look at the whole thing.
At the board meeting, the auditors told Lay that Bourget and his traders were manipulating earnings, destroying daily trading records, and probably gambling way beyond their limits.
The next day, we found out that Lay's decision was to basically change nothing as far as the operation's concerned, and the reason he gave was that this was the only part of the combined company that was making any money, and that he could not, kill the golden goose.
The traders weren't fired or even disciplined. Instead, Enron sent a telex to Bourget. Please keep making us millions. Instead of reducing Enron's risk, Lay encouraged his traders to gamble more.
I'm going straight to the top. Whoa.
Ken Lay saw in Jeff Stilling the guy who had the answer to what the future of the natural gas business was supposed to be. Ken Lay is also a guy who considers himself a visionary, and he liked other people he thought of as visionaries. He liked people with big ideas, and Jeff Skilling was a person with the biggest ideas of all.
Jeff Skilling's biggest single idea was to find a new way to deliver energy. Rather than be bound by the physical flow of the pipeline, Enron would become a kind of stock market for natural gas. It was a magical new idea. Transform energy into financial instruments that could be traded like stocks and bonds.
So that was the one good idea. In 1992, using that good idea, we became the largest buyer and seller of natural gas in North America.
Jeff was like the prophet. He came in and said, there's a whole new world out there. Forget about this pipeline stuff, the staid pipeline in the ground and gas in and gas out. We can recreate this entire industry.
An attorney from Vinson & Elkins, Amanda Martin was one of the first executives hired by Jeff Skilling and became part of his inner circle.
The excitement was palpable. You cannot imagine how proud we all were to be there. And then, of course, we had a leader who imbued us with a sense of confidence that if we were smart, anything could be accomplished. And then the bottom line, we began to make money. And that in and of itself was a reaffirmation that this could be big.
Skilling saw the opportunity to build an industry new and to start a business from scratch, but he had one specific condition that had to be met before he'd join Enron, and it was that he'd be allowed to use a certain kind of accounting known as mark-to-market. Arthur Andersen signed off and the SEC approved it.
I remember walking in and going, what's going on? And Causey and everybody, I mean, everyone was so excited, and in came the champagne, and we'd got mark-to-market accounting treatment. And I often think about how clear my memory was about that event. And that was the beginning of a major cog in the downfall, ultimately, of Enron.
Mark-to-market accounting allowed Enron to book potential future profits on the very day a deal was signed. No matter how little cash actually came in the door, to the outside world, Enron's profits could be whatever Enron said they were.
Very subjective. And very, it left it open to manipulation.
And they were saying that we're going to sell power out of this power plant in 10 years for X dollars per kilowatt. And there was no way anybody could prove that they could do it.
Well,
hey,
good
Rich,
morning.
how are you?
Finally,
good
great,
to see you.
Jeff.
Yeah.
Good
Morning,
to see you,
Rich.
Todd. Sit down.
We've been working hard on this, and we've really pulled out all the stops. Look what we got. Origination. We did $20 million last year. We think we can do $120 million this year. Trading. We did $10 million last year. We think we can do 64 this year. This is the key. We're going to move from mark-to-market accounting to something I call HFV, hypothetical future value accounting.
Whoa!
If we do that, we can add a gazillion dollars to the bottom line.
Whoa, Jeff! All right, that sounds fantastic. Oh, Jeff, thank you. That's just superb performance. And you're going to go far, my boy. Probably president of the company one day.
You think so?
I think.
He really believed that the idea was everything, and that when you came up with an idea, you should be able to book the profits from that idea right away. Because otherwise, some lesser man was taking the profits from the idea that some greater man had come up with in the past.
When Jeff Skilling applied to Harvard Business School, the professor asked him if he was smart. He replied, "I'm smart." One of his favorite books was The Selfish Gene, about the ways human nature is steered by greed and competition in the service of passing on our genes. At Enron, Skilling wanted to set free the basic instincts of survival of the fittest.
Jeff had a very Darwinian view of how the world worked. He was famous for saying once in Enron's early years that money was the only thing that motivated people.
Skilling's notion of how the world should work really trickled down and affected everything about how Enron did business.
He instituted a system known as the PRC, or Performance Review Committee. It required that people be graded from a 1 to a 5, and roughly 10% of people had to be a 5, and those people were supposed to be fired. Hence, this came to be known as rank and yank.
I personally am convinced that the PRC process is the most important process that we conduct as a company.
I've never heard of a company yet that would be successful terminating 15% of their people every year just to satisfy the fact that the other employees had to vote on them.
And so when you're being evaluated by that group, you are getting direct communication from Ken and me about what the objectives of the company are and how you fit with those objectives.
It was a brutal process. The ability for a 25-year-old to go in and to be reviewed and to be superior, and as a consequence, get a $5 million bonus. I don't think that's repeated in many places in corporate America.
Our culture is a tough culture. It is a very, very aggressive culture.
$8 million on new deals.
At Enron, no one was more aggressive than the traders.
If I'm on the way to my boss's office to argue about my compensation, and if I step on somebody's throat on the way, that doubles it, well, I'll stomp on the guy's throat. You know, that's how people work.
On the trading side, we got to be the biggest, baddest house in town. And by necessity, if you wanted to be in the market, you had to deal with Enron.
Trying to reconcile your big numbers here.
Enron's traders were like the super powerful high school clique that even the principal doesn't dare to rein in. They had become the major engine of at least reported profits at the company. They took Jeff Skilling and Ken Lay's belief in free markets and turned it into an ideology.
But they pitch it almost as a new economic religion.
Enron Online will change the markets for many, many commodities. It is creating an open, transparent marketplace that replaces the dark, blind system that existed. It is real simple. You turn on your computer, and it's right there. That's our vision. We're trying to change the world.
I think Jeff Skilling had a desperate need to believe that Enron was a success. I think he identified with Enron. He proclaimed at one point, "I am Enron."
The other thing about people at Enron is a lot of them were former nerds, and including Jeff Skilling.
He had been paunchy, he had big glasses, he losing his hair, and Jeff Skilling one day kind of woke up and decided to change himself. And he started working out, lost a lot of weight, but he really did remake himself through sheer will and force of personality.
When Jeff got LASIK on his eyes, everybody at Enron got LASIK, so nobody was wearing glasses.
I think Jeff Skilling is really a tragic figure in a classic sense of the word. He's a guy that people describe as incandescently brilliant, but he's also a guy who is radically different than he at times portrays himself. He's portrayed himself as somebody who has very tightly monitored risk. In reality, he's a gambler. He gambled away huge sums of money before he was 20 years old by making wild bets on the market.
So Jeff Skilling, risk was glamorous. He was a huge risk taker. He actually talked about wanting to go on trips that were so perilous that someone could actually die. This manifested itself in trips that Jeff Skilling led for a small group of friends and customers.
A core cadre of Enron guys used to go on these wild adventures. Andy Fastow would go, Ken Rice would go.
The trips were legend. You know, we can sit and think about what strange insecurities they were trying to overcome, but it made them feel good as men.
And they took a particularly memorable trip to the Baja, 1,200 miles in very rugged terrain in Mexico. This is a trip where people crash bikes. Ken Rice was on the trip and he busted a lip and required a bunch of stitches. People broke bones. One guy flipped a Jeep and almost got killed. Those sorts of stories at Enron became legend, and it fed the whole macho culture of the place.
Jeff Skilling had a way of describing people that he liked. He said, "I like guys with spikes." He liked somebody with something extreme about them.